It started on a Tuesday, the kind of gray Tuesday that made the sky feel heavier than usual. Fall was giving way to winter in tiny, invisible ways. Biting winds around the school gates, the crunch of dead leaves under tired sneakers, and the quiet hush of a classroom that smelled like pencil shavings and dust. And that was the day she showed up. The new girl. No one knew her name at first, just that she had long sleeves even when it wasn't cold, and eyes that seemed to memorize every crack in the hallway floor. She didn't speak, didn't smile, just sat in the second row, back straight, books aligned perfectly at the edge of her desk. Some called her weird, some called her ghost. But Ethan Carter, 12 years old, eyes like flint and heart too big for his age, he didn't call her anything, not out loud, but he watched the way she flinched when someone laughed too loud, watched how her hands trembled when passing papers forward, watched how she pressed her fingers to her collarbone like there was a secret she had to keep buried there. That lunch, it happened. A boy named Wyatt, bigger, louder, and cruel in the way only children taught by pain can be, snatched the girl's sandwich from her tray. "What's this? Sad lunch for a sad little mute?" The cafeteria laughed, not because it was funny, but because no one wanted to be next. The girl didn't respond, just stared at the tray, then at her hands. Ethan's fork froze mid-bite. He watched as Wyatt unwrapped the sandwich and dropped it on the floor. "Oops," he grinned. And that's when the new girl did something no one expected. She bent down, not to pick up the sandwich, but to pull something out of her backpack. A small photo. Wrinkled, black and white. She stared at it, whispered something under her breath, then calmly stood, walked to the trash can, and tossed the sandwich away. Didn't look at anyone, didn't cry, just walked out of the cafeteria with her back straight. But something in her eyes, gone. Ethan didn't eat the rest of his lunch. That evening, when his dad, Ryan Carter, school janitor and part-time auto shop mechanic, picked him up in their squeaky pickup, Ethan was quiet. Ryan glanced over. "You all right, bud?" Ethan shrugged. "There's a new girl." "Yeah?" "She doesn't talk much." Ryan nodded. "That's okay. Some people carry things they don't know how to say yet." Ethan was quiet again. Then, "Some boys were mean to her." Ryan waited. Ethan looked out the window. "I didn't do anything. There it was." Ryan sighed, slowed the truck. "You don't have to fight every fight, Ethan," he said carefully. "But sometimes, just standing next to someone is the loudest thing you can do." Ethan stared at the rearview mirror, where his own eyes stared back at him. The next morning, he left a note in his lunchbox for his dad. It read, "I think I'm ready to stand next to her." Wednesday came with a chill that snuck under sleeves and made the windows at Harrison Middle fog up by 10 a.m. Ethan had barely slept. All night he'd thought about her, how still she was when they mocked her, how she didn't defend herself, didn't cry, didn't fight back. But what haunted him most was the photo, the way she'd held it like a lifeline. He packed 2 sandwiches that morning, peanut butter and honey, his dad's favorite kind. "Both for you?" Ryan asked, sipping burnt diner coffee. "One's for someone else." Ryan didn't press. He just nodded. Good. Then don't drop it, he smiled. Ethan didn't. Lunch came fast. Too fast. He spotted her sitting alone at the edge of the cafeteria, on a bench pushed against the wall near the supply closet. Her tray had only apple slices and milk. No sandwich today. Ethan walked over, each step louder in his own ears than it probably was on the linoleum. He stood in front of her, awkward, quiet. She didn't look up. He gently placed the sandwich next to her tray. It's peanut butter. My dad says it's the best when the honey leaks out the sides. Still no eye contact. But her hands hovered near the sandwich. Ethan didn't sit yet. He waited, then tried again. I'm Ethan, he said. I sit at the blue table with the kid who eats only crackers and the girl who hums Taylor Swift. That earned a flicker of a glance, just a flicker. But it was something. He sat down next to her. Silence. Then, Lena. Her voice was almost a whisper. Scratchy. Like it hadn't been used in a while. Ethan turned slightly. Hi, Lena. She said nothing else. But she unwrapped the sandwich, bit into it, chewed slowly, and for the first time since she'd arrived, someone sat next to her without making her feel like a ghost. Word spread fast. By fifth period, Wyatt had heard that the weird girl had made a friend, that Ethan Carter had sat with her, that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as powerless as they'd thought. So he waited by her locker after school, arms crossed, teeth clenched. You got a boyfriend now, freak? Lena froze. Ethan, a few steps away, dropped his books and walked over. She's not a freak, he said, steady. And if you've got a problem, you can say it to me. Wyatt scoffed. You gonna fight me, janitor's kid? That word hit harder than expected. But Ethan didn't flinch. No. Just standing here, he said, echoing his dad's words, loud as I need to. A teacher rounded the corner just then, and Wyatt backed off with a sneer. Lena looked at Ethan, really looked, and whispered, Thank you. That night, at the dinner table, Ryan noticed Ethan wasn't eating his broccoli. You spend all your courage today? Ethan grinned. Maybe. Ryan leaned back in his chair. That's okay. You're allowed to be tired when you've done something brave. There was a pause. Then Ethan said, Her name is Lena. Ryan nodded. Good name. She doesn't talk much. Still waters, Ryan said. They run deepest. And in a small apartment above a garage, the quiet girl with two big eyes and a heart made of shattered glass placed Ethan's sandwich wrapper inside her notebook, pressed it flat, because, for her, that moment wasn't just lunch. It was proof that kindness could still find her, even when she thought it never would again. The next week passed quietly, but not silently, because Lena, still whisper quiet, still buttoned up and barely seen, had begun to leave traces of herself behind. Not loud ones, not bold, just enough to say, I'm still here. She borrowed books from the library and returned them with dog-eared pages and pencil-sketched margins. She sat a row closer to the teacher. And at lunch, Ethan always made sure to bring something extra. Sometimes just half a cookie. Other times, an apple, cut in. A perfect spiral the way his dad taught him. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. It was proximity with promise. But even proximity could feel dangerous in a place like Harrison Middle. It was Mrs. Rayburn, the music teacher, who first noticed. During a free period, Lena had wandered into the empty choir room and sat down at the old, upright piano. She thought she was alone, didn't know anyone could hear. She played softly, halting notes, broken chords, melodies stitched together like a secret lullaby. But it was the singing that made Mrs. Rayburn pause. No lyrics, just humming. A voice that cracked like porcelain but still held tune. It wasn't performance. It wasn't polished. It was pain trying to speak. And Mrs. Rayburn let it be. Didn't interrupt. Just left a note on the piano for later. Music is safe here. Come back any time. Meanwhile, Ethan was learning how to carry someone else's silence. He didn't push Lena to talk, didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. But he started noticing things, the way her sleeves tugged over her wrists every time someone passed behind her, the way she never raised her hand, even when she clearly knew the answer, the way her backpack never left her side. It wasn't just shyness, it was guardedness, worn like armor. And then, one Friday, after art class, she dropped her sketchbook. It fell open at his feet. He reached down to pick it up, then froze. On the page, a drawing of a door, closed, heavy, covered in locks, but just beneath it, in pencil. Someday I'll let someone knock. Lena snatched it back, her face flushed, breath caught, eyes wide. I'm sorry, she whispered. Ethan shook his head. Don't be. It's beautiful. She looked away. It's just a drawing. No, he said, softer. It's a door, and I'll wait outside it as long as you need. That weekend, Ethan asked his dad a question at the auto shop. Dad, how do you help someone without making them feel broken? Ryan wiped grease from his hands, thoughtful. Sometimes, he said, you don't help. You stand beside. You hold tools. You stay quiet until they ask. Ethan nodded. Then, what if they never ask? Ryan smiled gently. Then you've still shown them they're not alone. That counts for more than you think. At school on Monday, Ethan brought Lena a folded piece of paper. Inside, a drawing he'd made, a cracked door, and a kid sitting outside it, holding a sandwich. Underneath it, one sentence. No rush. I'm just here. Lena didn't say anything, but that day, for the first time, she smiled. The cold came in full now. Scarves began replacing sweatshirts. The playground slide turned silver in the morning frost, and Lena started coughing, just a little, but enough for the nurse to notice. Still, she showed up, every day, quiet as fog, present as pain. Ethan noticed the way she hunched her shoulders more now, as if trying to hide something beneath her jacket, and she flinched, visibly, when someone accidentally brushed against her arm. The signs were there, but no one asked, because no one wanted the answer, until the accident. It was gym class, a game of dodgeball. Wyatt, loud, impulsive, and still bitter, launched a ball harder than necessary. It hit Lena square in the chest. She fell. The gym went silent. The teacher rushed over. but she waved them off quickly, face pale. "I'm fine," she mumbled, but her collar shifted as she stood, and beneath it, just for a flash, Ethan saw the edge of a bruise, not purple, yellow-green, old faded, but real, and too big to be caused by a rubber ball. His heart dropped. Something inside him tightened like a screw being turned too far. That night, Ethan didn't eat, didn't talk. He sat at the dinner table, staring at his plate, thinking about what he saw and what it meant, and how terrifying it was to know and not be able to prove. "Ryan, noticed, kiddo?" he said gently. "You've got the storm face." Ethan looked up. "What would you do if someone was getting hurt, but they didn't want you to say anything?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, wiped his hands on his napkin. "I'd ask why they didn't." "Want it said?" "Because maybe they're scared." Ryan nodded. "Then I'd make sure they know they're safe, with me, no matter what. Sometimes that's the first thing that has to happen before anything else can." Ethan nodded slowly, and an idea began to bloom. The next day, Ethan placed something on Lena's desk during homeroom. Not a sandwich this time. A note. Simple, folded. Written in pencil, in blocky 12-year-old letters. "You don't have to tell me anything, but if you ever want to, I promise I won't be scared." He didn't wait for a response. Didn't hover. Just sat in his seat, staring at the board, heart beating like a drum inside his chest. Lena read the note, then, very slowly, slipped her sleeve up her arm. Just enough for him to see it. The eye cheek, faint remains of another bruise. Then she pointed at it. And then she nodded. Tiny. Almost imperceptible. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. After school, Ethan sat in the passenger seat of the pickup. Ryan drove with one hand, sipping coffee. With the other, Ethan finally spoke. "I think she's hurt." Ryan didn't look surprised. "You saw something?" "She let me." "Then it's time," Ryan said. "Time for what?" "To tell someone who can help." Ethan hesitated. "What if she gets mad?" Ryan reached over, squeezed his shoulder. "Then you sit next to her anyway, because love does what's right, even when it's hard." That night, Ryan made a call to the school, to the counselor. Not with accusations, not with panic, just with concern and quiet, careful words. Some things moved slowly after that, and some things didn't. But one thing became clear. The silence Lena lived in, it wasn't chosen, it was survival. And now, someone had finally knocked on the door. 2 days passed before anyone at school said a word. Lena still came in quietly, still kept her backpack hugged close to her chest. But something had shifted in the air. The counselor had pulled her out of class for a routine check-in, the kind with tea and paper cups and tissues placed too obviously on the desk. Lena said nothing that day, just stared out the window while the counselor tried to reach her through smiles and soft words. But when she left, she tucked Ethan's note in the pocket of her coat. That afternoon, Ryan Carter showed up early to pick Ethan up. They sat in the truck longer than usual before starting the engine. "Dad," Ethan said, "what if her family isn't safe?" Ryan tapped the steering wheel, then reached into the glove box and pulled out a photo. old, curled at the corners. It was Ethan, about 6 years old, sitting on Ryan's lap, holding a toy hammer. Behind them, a broken porch, a younger Ryan with hollow eyes. "That was a year after your mom died," he said quietly. "I didn't talk to anyone, didn't ask for help. I thought being strong meant being silent." Ethan looked at the photo. "You look tired." I was. Ryan glanced over. "But then one day I heard you sing to yourself in the back seat. Off-key, loud, just happy. And it reminded me life was still happening. Even if mine had paused." He put the photo away. "We don't fix people, Ethan, but we show up. And sometimes that's the beginning." Meanwhile, Lena walked home, slower than usual that day. She counted her steps, pressed the corners of her photo deeper into her hand. She passed the mailbox with peeling paint, past the dead rose bush, past the front door that never squeaked, because no one dared slam it. Inside, the house smelled like bleach and silence. Ralphie dear, stepfather was watching TV. Loud volume, louder presence. "Where were you?" His voice was low, but sharp. "School," she answered softly. He looked at her. Stood. "Who'd you talk to?" "No one." "Don't lie." She shook her head. His hand didn't come down. Not this time. But his voice did, like thunder echoing through a locked attic. "People who make trouble disappear, Lena. You know that." She flinched, went to her room, and locked the door behind her. Later that night, the wind picked up outside. It rattled the gutters and whistled through the trees. Ethan lay in bed, eyes wide open. Then he sat up. He went to his drawer and pulled out his own drawing, the one of the cracked door and the kid sitting outside it. He added something, a small light above the door, then folded it carefully. Tomorrow, he would give it to her. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing. No one should have to live with locked windows and voices that burn. Not when someone was willing to knock. It was Thursday. The hallways at Harrison Middle buzzed with midterm tension and the faint scent of hot glue from a sixth-grade art project gone wrong. Lena walked in wearing the same worn gray hoodie she always did, but this time her eyes scanned the halls before heading to her locker, calculated, careful, like she was measuring danger before every step. Ethan was already there, waiting. He didn't say anything, just smiled and handed her the folded paper. She opened it slowly. It was the drawing again, the cracked door, the kid. But now, a soft yellow light glowed above the doorframe, drawn in colored pencil, like a candle left burning for someone who hadn't come home yet. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "Thank you." And for a moment, just a second, her shoulders didn't seem quite so heavy. In the teacher's lounge, Mrs. Rayburn stirred sugar into her tea, her hands trembling slightly. She had been thinking about the day she'd overheard Lena humming in the music room. That voice, it didn't sound like talent. It sounded like a secret trying to escape. And now, the counselor's request from yesterday lingered in her inbox. Watch for behavioral patterns. possible concern flagged. Mrs. Rayburn didn't know the whole story, but she knew the signs, and, more importantly, she remembered a girl not unlike Lena from her own childhood, one who stopped singing too soon. Back in the cafeteria, Wyatt and his group were louder than usual. He tossed a grape across the table, smirking. I see the mute found her shadow again. Ethan didn't respond, just kept eating. Lena didn't flinch. Wyatt sneered. Bet she cries in the bathroom between periods. Ethan finally looked up. Do you ever get tired of being empty? The table went quiet. Wyatt blinked. What? Empty, Ethan repeated. Like, you say things that don't matter. You do things that hurt people, but it never seems like it fills anything. Lena's eyes widened. Wyatt stood up, fists clenched. And just then, clang. A tray hit the floor behind them. It was Ms. Morales, the lunch aide. She had heard. Her face said everything. I think you need to go cool off. Hershey said to Wyatt, calm but firm. Wyatt stormed off. Lena looked at Ethan, stunned. He shrugged, tired of waiting for someone else to say something. That afternoon, Lena stayed behind after class. Mrs. Rayburn had left the piano bench open. The lights dimmed. The room felt like a memory, quiet, warm, and old. Lena sat down, pressed one key, then another. Then she sang, just one verse of a lullaby. Her voice cracked on the third note, but she kept going. Mrs. Rayburn, listening from the office, wiped her eyes. After Lena left, she placed a sticky note on the piano. The world needs your voice. One note at a time. At home that evening, Ryan handed Ethan a small paper bag. What's this? 2 sandwiches. One for you. One for the girl who sings. Ethan smiled. How do you know? I was janitor when your mom used to sing in that same room. The walls talk, kid. You just have to know how to listen. That night, Lena added something to her sketchbook. The door was still there, but now, just beneath the light, she drew a small figure, sitting on the porch, waiting, holding a sandwich, and smiling. Friday started like any other, but something in the air felt different. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm, not loud, but expectant, watching, holding its breath. Lena was quieter than usual, not withdrawn, just bracing. She hadn't slept. The night before, she'd overheard something she wasn't supposed to. Her stepfather on the phone, whispering, angry, saying her name, saying, they're asking questions now. Don't know where she's getting these ideas. Lena didn't know what that meant, but she knew what it felt like. It felt like something bad was about to break. At 11:37 a.m., while Mrs. Rayburn's class was halfway through a listening exercise, the door opened. A woman with a clipboard stepped inside. Lena Ashwood? The room turned to look. Lena froze in her seat. The woman offered a soft smile. I'm with Children and Family Services. We just need to talk. There was no accusation in her voice, no alarm, but the words still sounded like thunder. Lena's lips parted slightly. Her eyes darted to Ethan. He nodded. Just once. You're not alone. They took her to the counselor's office. The woman's name was Janine. Her voice was soft, but steady. like someone who had done this many times and still managed to mean every word. "I'm here to make sure you're okay," she said. "That's all. You don't have to tell me everything. Just what you want to." Lena stared at the ground, then whispered, "I don't want to go back there." That was all it took. Janine gently reached for her hand. "You don't have to." Outside, word spread faster than wildfire. Kids who never noticed Lena before were now suddenly full of opinions. She got someone in trouble. She probably lied. I bet it's not even real. By lunch, the whispers turned to murmurs, the murmurs to mutters, and then Wyatt, brimming with his usual venom, said just loud enough, knew there was something wrong with her. Daddy issues or something. The room stilled. Ethan stood. He didn't yell, didn't push, but his voice, when it came, cut cleaner than a shout. She trusted one person, and if that person was you, you'd be on the floor crying. Wyatt smirked. "What are you going to do, Carter? Cry with her?" "No," Ethan said. "But if you'd ever actually cried, you wouldn't talk like this." The teacher on lunch duty heard. So did half the cafeteria. And for the first time in 2 years, Wyatt went quiet. Later that afternoon, Lena waited in the office, her backpack on her knees, arms wrapped tightly around it like a life vest. Ethan slipped in quietly. He sat down beside her. Didn't say anything at first. Then, "My mom left when I was 6? Lena looked over. "Surprised?" "I don't know why," he continued. "She just stopped being there. My dad raised me. We didn't talk about it much. Just tried to stay busy." He paused, then added, "But the quiet still hurt." Lena's eyes began to well, not because he was telling her his pain, but because for the first time, someone trusted her enough to share theirs. That night, Lena didn't go home. Janine arranged for emergency foster placement. The family was kind, older, gentle. Lena slept in a bed with a comforter that smelled like lavender. No yelling, no locks on the windows, no fear, and for the first time in a long time. She didn't sleep with shoes on, because she didn't need to run. Saturday morning arrived like a soft exhale. Sunlight crept across the quilted blanket covering Lena in the guest room of the Monroe home. The window was cracked just enough to let the air in, not the noise. It smelled like bread rising downstairs, and the silence, for the first time, didn't feel dangerous. It felt gentle. Mrs. Monroe knocked before entering. She held out a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, cut into perfect triangles. "We didn't know how you liked them, sweetheart, so I guessed," she said softly. "There's jam on the side if you want it." Lena nodded. Her voice still hadn't woken up, but her body was starting to. And for the first time in years, she ate without counting how many bites it would take to finish and flee. Meanwhile, Ethan spent his Saturday morning at the auto shop with Ryan. He tightened bolts and wiped windshield smudges, but his mind was somewhere else. On a folded note, on a cracked door, on a girl who hummed lullabies when no one listened. "She didn't come back to her house," Ethan said aloud. Ryan glanced at him from under the hood of a car. "I know," he said simply. "You called that social worker?" "I didn't have to," Ryan said. "You already opened the right door. The rest followed." Ethan nodded. Still, something in his chest felt untethered. He wasn't worried she was unsafe now. He was worried she might disappear completely. Sunday came and went. Mrs. Monroe offered Lena a warm bath and a stack of neatly folded pajamas. There were board games on the kitchen table and soft gospel music playing on the radio. The Monroes didn't ask many questions, just left room, and Lena, used to silence as punishment, began learning silence could also be peace. She drew again. Nothing big, just the cracked door. But this time, the light above it wasn't flickering. It glowed steady. Monday morning, the school hallway was unusually quiet when Ethan walked in. He glanced toward Lena's locker. It was still closed. He tried not to look disappointed, tried not to wonder if maybe she wouldn't come back. Then he heard it, a small sound. Not humming, not footsteps, a zip of a backpack behind him. He turned. There she was, wearing a clean hoodie, her hair pulled back, sketchbook clutched close to her chest. She looked different, not because she smiled, she didn't, not because she talked, she hadn't yet, but because her eyes were brighter. She nodded at him, and for Ethan, it was the same as shouting. In homeroom, Mrs. Rayburn placed a music flyer on every desk. School showcase coming up. Anyone interested in performing, even anonymously, let me know. You don't have to be good. You just have to be honest. Lena read the flyer twice, folded it, put it in her pocket. Ethan noticed, said nothing, but he made a silent promise right there. If she ever got on that stage, he'd be in the front row, no matter what. At lunch, something small but seismic happened. Wyatt, seeing Lena return, slid his tray to the end of the table and muttered, "Great, Freak's back." But this time, he wasn't met with laughter. Not even from his friends. One girl frowned, another rolled her eyes, and one boy moved to a different table entirely. The tides had turned. Lena didn't need to speak to be heard anymore. Her silence had become power. That afternoon, in the music room, she sat at the piano. Mrs. Rayburn walked in mid-melody. Lena looked up, hesitating. But Mrs. Rayburn just smiled. "Mind if I stay?" Lena shook her head. She played a few more notes, then whispered, Can I sing for the showcase? Just not on the stage. Maybe a recording?" Mrs. Rayburn's eyes softened. "Of course you can, sweetheart. Music doesn't need spotlights. It just needs ears." Lena nodded, and for the first time in months, she began to believe she was worth hearing. By Tuesday, the school's morning bulletin announced the upcoming talent showcase. Sign-up sheets filled fast. A drum solo. A magic act. 2 girls planning a dance with glow sticks. And then, a name appeared in small handwriting, almost hesitant, next to music, vocal piano, pre-recorded. Lena A. No one knew yet what that meant, but Ethan did. He found the note in his locker after lunch, folded neatly like before. Inside was a hand-drawn image, a piano bench, 2 sneakers beneath it, and a speech bubble with no words, just music notes floating out. At the bottom, Lena had written, "I'm going to try." That was all, but Ethan felt it in his chest like thunder, not loud, but shaking everything. After school, he asked Ryan, "Dad, how do you record a song?" Ryan smirked. "You planning to go platinum already?" "No, It's for a friend. Ryan put down the wrench he was holding. Then we're doing it right. That evening, Ryan set up a small recording rig in the back room of the shop. Not fancy, just a mic, a laptop, and a blanket draped over a chair for soundproofing. He texted Mrs. Monroe, and 2 days later, Lena walked into the garage. Her eyes scanned the tools, the wires, the grease-stained blueprints taped to the walls. "This is where the magic happens?" she asked softly. Ryan smiled. "All kinds of magic." Ethan handed her a warm mug of tea. She held it like it was made of gold, then sat, pressed one key, then another, and sang. Her voice was like rain on a metal roof, soft at first, then fuller, then aching. She didn't sing loud, didn't belt, but it didn't matter. Every note was soaked in something deeper, something people only hear when they're listening with their own bruises. When the last note drifted into silence, no one spoke for a long time. Then Ryan exhaled. "Kid," he said, "if this doesn't make them cry, they don't have ears." The day of the showcase came. The gym was decorated with paper lanterns and folding chairs, most wobbling slightly. Parents filed in. Teachers passed out programs. Ethan scanned the room, then looked toward the laptop they'd set up on the side table next to the projector. It was cued. Lena's name wasn't on the program, but she was in the room, tucked in the back row, hoodie on, head down. She wasn't there to be seen, just to be heard. Midway through the showcase, the lights dimmed. Mrs. Rayburn stepped up to the mic. "This next performance is a little different. No lights, no curtain. Just a voice that deserves to be felt." She pressed play, and for the next 2.5 minutes, the gym went still. Kids who used to laugh, parents scrolling on their phones, teachers whispering in the back. All of them frozen. Lena's voice filled the space like sunlight through a cracked window. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. By the time it ended, no one clapped right away, because they were still swallowing lumps in their throats and wiping eyes they didn't want to admit had watered. Then someone stood, then another, and then the room was clapping, really clapping. A standing ovation for a girl no one had heard until now. Lena didn't stand, didn't wave. She just leaned her head back against the gym wall and smiled. Not for the applause, but for the first time in her life, her voice had taken up space, and the world hadn't fallen apart. It had leaned in. The gymnasium lights dimmed again after the final act. Chairs scraped gently as parents and students began to shuffle toward the exit, murmurs still echoing from Lena's song. There was a heaviness in the air, but not from sadness, from reverence. The kind that only comes when truth is spoken aloud in a language everyone somehow understands. Lena stayed seated in the back row, knees pulled up, eyes fixed on the laptop screen that had just played her voice for the world. Ethan turned and caught her gaze across the room. She didn't wave. She didn't have to. The smallest nod passed between them. An invisible ribbon stretched from one survivor to another. Ryan placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "She did it." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, she did." That night, back at the Monroses' house, Lena sat at the kitchen table with her sketchbook. She flipped past the old drawings, the cracked doors, the shadows, the hands reaching through smoke. She paused on the one she drew after singing at the shop. She added something new, a stage. Not big, not grand, just a small platform. And in front of it, a crowd of tiny figures drawn in colored pencil. None had faces, but they all had open mouths, singing with her. The next morning, Mrs. Rayburn opened her email during breakfast. She almost dropped her coffee. It was from a parent she didn't recognize. My daughter doesn't talk much about school, but last night she came home with tears in her eyes and said, "Someone sang for people like me. I don't know who your student is, but tell her she reached someone deeply. Thank you for letting her voice be heard." Mrs. Rayburn forwarded it to the principal, and to the counselor, and to Ryan. Ryan read the message in the break room, sitting on an overturned oil bucket. He smiled the way only a parent can smile, when the child they believed in begins to believe in themselves. Then he sent a short text to Ethan. She changed someone. Already. Lena didn't hear about the email right away. Instead, she returned to school Monday and found a small folded paper taped to her locker. Inside, a hand-drawn piano with the words, "I felt seen. Thank you." No name, just a heart. Below that, another paper had been slipped through the locker vents. "I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't know how much it mattered. Wyatt." Lena stared at it, then folded it carefully. She didn't forgive him yet, but it was a start. In homeroom, Mrs. Rayburn passed out a handout titled "Voices That Heal." It featured quotes from anonymous audience members about the performance. One stood out to Lena. "Sometimes a stranger's pain lets you name your own." She traced the words with her finger, then glanced across the room at Ethan. He smiled. She didn't smile back. She grinned. For the first time, it reached all the way to her eyes. That afternoon, the school counselor pulled Lena aside. "Social Services has fast-tracked your placement review," she said gently. "The Monroes asked if you'd like to stay longer. Possibly a lot longer." Lena blinked. "You mean like live with them?" "If you want." Lena didn't respond right away. She thought of the lavender-scented blankets, the way Mrs. Monroe cut toast into triangles, the quiet safety, the warmth that didn't demand anything in return. And she nodded, softly. But it was enough. That night, Ethan found a folded paper slipped inside his backpack. A drawing of two stick figures on a porch. One held a sandwich, the other held a microphone, and beneath it, Lena had written, "Thank you for standing outside the door." The first time Lena returned to the old house, just to collect her things, she did so with Janine, the social worker, beside her. It was raining lightly. The front gate still squeaked, and the porch steps still dipped in the middle. Everything looked the same, except Lena wasn't. Her shoulders didn't curl in anymore. She didn't apologize for existing when she stepped through the door. Her stepfather sat in the recliner, barely glancing up. The TV flickered behind him. Janine spoke calmly, professionally. "We're here to retrieve Lena's belongings. She'll be staying with another family. There's no confrontation needed." He scoffed. "Good riddance." Lena didn't flinch. Instead, she walked to her old room. The door still had the crack she'd etched with her fingernail that one night she couldn't sleep. She packed her sketchbooks, a few worn clothes, and one photo. Her mother, blurry, smiling, holding baby Lena at a fair. The only thing not faded was the red ribbon in her hair. On her way out, Lena paused by the cracked front door. For years, that crack had meant danger, but now it looked like something else. Escape. She walked out and never looked back. At school, something remarkable began to happen. Other students who had once kept their pain silent started stepping forward. One by one. A boy with a stutter who submitted a poem to the class blog. A girl from Science Club who asked to sing backup at the next event. Even Wyatt, awkward, defensive, asked to volunteer at the next school showcase. Ethan noticed it all. So did Mrs. Rayburn. And Lena? She just kept drawing. Little moments, new beginnings, like her new room at the Monrose's house, with the soft lamp that always stayed on. Like the shared lunches with Ethan, now quiet, but never heavy. Like the day Mrs. Monroe let her bake bread, and the house filled with a warmth Lena hadn't tasted in years. Every drawing was a piece of proof that healing was happening. Not loud, not all at once, but real. One evening, Ethan sat with Ryan in the garage. Tools lay scattered across the workbench. Oil clung to their fingers, but Ethan barely noticed. "She's different now," Ethan said. Ryan looked up. "She's still quiet," Ethan added. "But it's not scared anymore. It's peaceful." Ryan smiled. "People think courage looks like yelling, but sometimes it looks like staying." Ethan nodded. "Like sitting at the same lunch table every day, even when no one else does." "Exactly." Then, after a beat, "I'm proud of you, kid." Ethan didn't say anything, but his chest felt fuller than it had in a long time. Meanwhile, Lena sat on the Monroe's back porch, drawing. She was sketching the cracked door again, but this time the crack was filled with gold. Like the Japanese art of kintsugi, broken things made beautiful. She added stars above the porch, then shaded in a new character. Not her, not Ethan, someone smaller. A girl with a quiet voice and a bold pencil. She wrote, under it, "The girl who stayed." Mrs. Monroe peeked out from the kitchen window. "You want cocoa?" Lena smiled. "Yes, please." The porch light flicked on behind her, warm, steady, like a lighthouse for anyone still out in the dark. Spring bloomed early in Farage that year. The trees on campus were already laced with pink blossoms, and the breeze carried the kind of warmth that made students linger in the hallways between classes just a little longer. Lena had started wearing color again. Not bold, not loud, but soft greens and earthy blues, shades of hope. She walked with her head up now, sketchbook still hugged close, but not like armor, more like a companion. Ethan noticed it most when she smiled without realizing it. She did that often now. At lunch, Lena passed a folded paper to Ethan. It wasn't a drawing this time. It was a flyer. Spring Harmony Festival. An evening of music, poetry, and stories that matter, open mic. Everyone welcome. Theme: Finding Your Voice. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Thinking of singing again?" Lena nodded. "Live this time." Ethan blinked. "Really?" She hesitated, then looked out toward the field where the wind played with the flag. Yeah, I think I'm ready to stand where they can see me. Ethan didn't say anything. He just reached for her hand and gave it the gentlest squeeze. Then I'll be there. That evening, back at the auto shop, Ethan and Ryan cleared out the garage. They swept the dust, rearranged the shelves, and even strung fairy lights around the ceiling beams. Looks like a concert venue, Ryan joked. It is, Ethan replied, taping up a handmade sign. Harmony rehearsal room. Lena showed up the next afternoon, nervous but determined. This time, her voice didn't tremble. She sang 3 songs. One was about a treehouse, another about a girl with paper wings, and the last was about Ethan. Not by name, but by presence. By the door that opened. By the boy who stood there. By the hands that didn't push, but waited. Ryan clapped quietly from the corner, pretending to be busy fixing a carburetor. But there were tears in his eyes. Word of the festival spread through the school. Wyatt asked to read a short story. Another. Girl wanted to recite a poem about her mom's illness. A boy from the soccer team planned to play violin. The quiet kids came forward. The overlooked ones stood tall, because one quiet girl had sung through her pain and left the door open behind her. The day before the event, Lena sat on the Monroes' porch with Mrs. Monroe. They drank cocoa and watched the sunset. Lena leaned her head against the wooden post and whispered, I used to think being invisible kept me safe. Mrs. Monroe listened, but it also kept me small. The older woman nodded. And now? I don't want to be small anymore, Lena said, and then, softly, but with certainty, I want to be heard. The Harmony Festival was held in the community park just off Main Street, a wide, open space framed by dogwood trees and dandelion-dotted grass. Parents brought lawn chairs. Students strung paper lanterns between picnic tables. The air smelled like kettle corn and something sweet from a bake sale tent nearby. There was no curtain, no formal program, just a mic, a few benches, and a sign painted by the art club. Everyone's voice matters. Ryan arrived early, setting up folding chairs near the front. He wore a button-up shirt that still smelled faintly of motor oil and a small red pin on his chest that said, Proud Dad. Ethan wandered the edges of the crowd until he saw Lena. She stood near the stage, not shaking, not hiding, just breathing. She wore a soft cream dress and a denim jacket. Her hair was down. No sketchbook today. Just a single folded lyric sheet in. Her hand, slightly crinkled at the edges. You ready? Ethan asked. Lena nodded, but her fingers twitched. I'm scared. He smiled. That means you care. She looked at him, searching for steadiness. He gave it with a look. You've already won. The performances began. Wyatt surprised everyone with a touching story about his brother's deployment. The audience clapped loud, not out of pity, but out of respect. The violinist made 2 mistakes and laughed through them. No one minded. When Lena's name was announced, the space fell silent, not out of skepticism, but something closer to anticipation. She stepped onto the makeshift stage. The mic squeaked slightly. She adjusted it. No flinching. She closed her eyes and began to sing. It wasn't polished. It wasn't showy. It was real. She sang of small windows, of echoing footsteps, of quiet tears under blankets no one saw. But then she sang of doors, of hands reaching through the dark, of courage found on wooden porches and rusty garage floors, of the boy who didn't try to fix her, but simply stayed. And when she reached the final verse, her voice didn't shake. It soared. People cried. Even the tough ones, even the ones who didn't know her name, because somehow it felt like she'd sung a part of everyone's story. When the last note faded, there was a beat of silence. Then the applause came. A wave. Lena blinked. She didn't cry. She just stood there, letting it wash over her, letting it fill the parts of her that used to be hollow. Ethan stood too. He didn't cheer. He just clapped steady, eyes locked on her. Because that's what you do when someone steps into who they were meant to be. You witness it. Afterward, Mrs. Rayburn hugged her. The principal shook her hand. Kids she'd never spoken to nodded with genuine admiration. One even whispered, "You were amazing." Lena didn't shrink. She said, "Thank you." 2 words, strong, clear, owned. That night, on the Monrose's porch, Ethan handed her a small wrapped box. Inside, a lapel pin, gold, shaped like a treble clef. She turned it over, engraved, "Your voice saved more than just you." She didn't say anything. She just hugged him. Tight. And in that moment, she wasn't the girl who used to hide. She was the girl the world finally heard. A week after the Harmony Festival, spring melted gently into summer. Final exams came and went. Hallways echoed with locker doors and laughter. Report cards were folded, handed out, forgotten. And plans for the break began to bloom. But Lena had one last task to complete before the school year ended. She sat at the kitchen table late one evening, a soft lamp glowing beside her. Everyone else was asleep. She took a deep breath and opened her old sketchbook, one of the first she brought from her former house. The edges were frayed, the corners curled. It smelled faintly of cedar and something older, something she hadn't missed. Inside, past the drawings of cracked doors and shadowy hallways, Lena flipped to a blank page. She began to write. Not a song, not a poem, a letter. To her mother. Dear Mom, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if letters reach wherever you are, but I need to talk to you anyway. I remember your hair smelled like mint when you hugged me. I remember your laugh when I sang to the mirror. I remember the way you made pancakes look like animals on Saturdays. And I remember when everything got quiet after you were gone. It stayed quiet for a long time. Too long. I forgot how to sing. I forgot how to draw the sun. But someone opened. A door I didn't know was still there. His name is Ethan. He listens like you did. And his dad, Ryan, fixes things without asking you to explain what's broken. I sang in front of people. I made friends. I started to feel real again. I'm going to keep drawing and singing and being loud when I need to be. because I think you'd want me to be heard. Love always. Lena, she didn't send the letter. She folded it, tucked it gently into the back of her sketchbook, and placed it in the drawer beside her bed. Not everything had to be sent. Some things just had to be written, to be released, to be freed. The next morning, Ryan was making pancakes when Lena walked into the kitchen. They weren't shaped like animals, but she smiled anyway. Ethan passed her a plate. Plans. For the summer? He asked. She nodded. Drawing, singing, maybe teaching a few kids at the center. Music? And how to be loud without yelling. Ryan flipped a pancake and grinned. Now that's a skill. Mrs. Monroe walked in, tying her robe. Coffee first, she mumbled. Lena giggled. An easy sound, one that filled the house. And stayed. That afternoon, she and Ethan sat on the porch, watching clouds. She pulled out a blank sketchbook. New, untouched. He raised an eyebrow. Fresh start? She nodded, then opened to the first page and drew a porch, a guitar, 2 chairs, and under it she wrote, "Not the end, just the quiet between songs." By mid-June, the community center had launched its summer arts program. They offered free classes for kids who couldn't afford lessons otherwise. Crafts, basic guitar, storytelling, and for the first time ever, voice and self-expression. Lena taught that class. It started small, just 3 kids. One wouldn't speak above a whisper. Another stared at the wall and hummed, but wouldn't make eye contact. The third wouldn't show up unless his older sister brought him in by the hand. And Lena understood all of it, so she didn't push. She told them, "You don't have to be loud. You just have to be true." She let them sing in whispers, in hums, behind chairs, into pillows, and little by little, they did. She called it soft strength. One Saturday, a new girl came to class, tall, lanky, nervous, chewed on her sleeve, and never took her hoodie off. Lena walked over and simply sat beside her. The girl glanced sideways. "You gonna make me sing?" "Nope." "You gonna ask why I'm quiet?" "No." A long pause. "Good," the girl whispered. They sat in silence for 5 minutes. Then Lena said softly, "But if you ever want to be heard, I'll be here." The girl didn't reply, but she didn't get up either. And the next week, she came back. That evening, Ethan waited outside the center. Lena walked out with a tired, glowing kind of joy. "How was it?" he asked. She smiled. "They're learning how to echo." He looked confused. "You know," she explained, "when someone speaks truth, and it makes someone else feel brave enough to answer back." Ethan nodded slowly. "Like you did for me?" She looked at him, her eyes clear. Exactly like that. At home, Ryan sat on the porch with a letter in his hands. Old worn. He passed it to Ethan. Ethan read it once, then twice. It was from Lena's grandmother. She had just found out that Lena was still in the system until recently and had reached out in hope, asking for a chance to write. Ethan looked worried. Lena had been stable for months. This might shake everything. Ryan rubbed his chin. "You should ask her, but make it her choice, not ours." So Ethan did. That night, they sat by the fire pit in the Monrose's backyard. He passed her the letter. She stared at it, didn't open it at first. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "Doesn't matter what I want. It's your life. You get to decide what doors stay closed and which ones open." She looked down at the envelope again. The edges were wrinkled, the ink slightly smeared. "Can I open it later?" she asked. He nodded. "Any time." Later that night, alone in her room, Lena opened the letter. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. "I never knew what happened after your mother passed. I'm so sorry. If you ever want to know me, my door is open, but only if you choose it. Love, Grandma Helen. No pressure, no guilt, just choice." Lena folded the letter gently, and for the first time in her life, she realized she had a say, not just in what happened to her, but in what she built from it. The last day of summer camp was more than just a goodbye. It was a showcase. Kids who had once barely spoken now stood in line, holding homemade instruments, poetry notebooks, crumpled lyric sheets. Lena sat backstage with them, smoothing their hair, adjusting collar tags, whispering, "You're more than enough. Just be you." The auditorium at the community center wasn't fancy, just rows of folding chairs and a stage built by volunteers. But the lights felt real. The energy, electric. Ethan sat in the middle row with Ryan, both beaming like two lighthouses in a storm of applause. When it was Lena's turn, she didn't bring a guitar. She didn't sing. She brought a microphone and 7 children, each one from her class. She introduced them by name. She told the crowd what they'd taught her. Then she stepped back and let them take the spotlight. One whispered a poem, another hummed a lullaby. A boy read from his journal and cried halfway through. No one laughed. They stood instead. Everyone stood. A standing ovation. Not for perfection, but for honesty, for courage, for growth. After the show, parents hugged their kids tighter. Strangers dropped donations in a jar marked, "More voices, please." Ryan wiped his eyes and pretended it was allergies. Ethan found Lena near the exit, helping one of the students tie her shoelaces. She looked up at him, flushed, but peaceful. "You didn't sing," he said. She shrugged. "I didn't need to." He tilted his head. "Why not?" She nodded toward the stage. "They did it for me." That night, back at the Monroe house, Lena stood at her bedroom window. The porch light was on, as always. The sketchbook lay open beside her. Half full now. No longer just shadows and cracks, but hands and windows, voices and sunrises. She picked up her pencil, drew a microphone, then a crowd of kids behind it. Then, beneath it, wrote, "Healing is when your echo becomes someone else's voice." She closed the book, went downstairs, and sat beside Ethan on the porch. Neither said much, but they didn't need to. The light glowed, the crickets hummed. The door stayed open, just like Lena's heart. Epilogue. 6 months later, Lena's letter to her grandmother became the opening lines of a published book of student poetry, illustrated by Lena herself. The school now had a Quiet Voices Club. Ryan donated tools to build a music studio in the garage. And Ethan, he stayed exactly who he was. The boy who didn't rescue with words, but with presence. The kind of father who didn't teach her to be loud. He taught her she didn't have to be silent to be safe. And that changed everything. Forever.